Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the 23rd edition of the ADAMA Art Salon. The African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, also known as ADAMA, is a new museum concept that centers on the global Black experience in the 21st century and beyond. The museum's motto, "Everywhere we go, there we are," is an affirmation of the indelible legacy of African descendant people around the world and a reminder that we are one family. My name is Halima Taha, and I am happy to host today's conversation with Otto and Tonya Wright. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I was looking forward to this conversation for a number of reasons. As you know, collecting is a very basic part of the human personality. Many of us start with stamps and coins and matchbox cars and records or CDs. And for some people, it was 8-tracks and posters and shoes and a myriad of other things. And one of the things that collecting certainly tells us is that our collections are as unique as our individual fingerprints. And so to that end, I would like to start this conversation just to ask you to share a little about yourselves, who you are, what your sensibilities are, individually and collectively, because those pieces to the puzzle that is an ongoing adventure in our lives that we're putting together also impact the way people approach their collections.
Well, thank you very much for having us. First and foremost, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Paku for putting and the board of directors at the ADAMA for putting this together and giving us the opportunity to talk about our collection. And also, we would like to thank you, Ms. Halima Taha, for gracing us with being our interviewer. We're very grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today. So I'll start. Well, I'll let you go first.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about yourself and.
Absolutely. I was actually born on a small island, Halima, called Anguilla, that not many people have heard of. About 12,000 people or so, and then just about, it's a little British colony, but everyone leaves, to go off to college, and I just did the same. I actually made my way to a small town in Canada called Peterborough, Ontario, and did my undergraduate degree there. And I always knew I wanted to go to medical school, and found myself in Hershey, Pennsylvania for medical school after having trekked from, Anguilla in the Caribbean all the way to Canada, back down to Hershey. And that's actually where I met this guy. And that's where that story began. But I've really spent a lot of time just kind of exploring the world and traveling, feeling like I could essentially live anywhere in the world because I have done that. I've lived on 2 different continents. And we now have 2 sons. We have an almost 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. And then, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So for me, well, my journey starts in Ghana. I was born in Accra, Ghana. I was born at a time when the hospital was on strike. So funny story my mother tells me is I was born in the back of a taxi outside of the hospital. So my journey actually begins. Yeah, so it begins in Accra, Ghana, where I grew up. I spent 13 years of my life there. I was raised by my mother, my grandma, and my grandparents. My grandfather ended up passing on Christmas Day in 1986. I'll never forget that day. And then I had the love and care of my grandmother and my mother. And then we had the opportunity to move to the U.S. in 1992. My mother got remarried and we moved to the United States. We moved to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And my father was a teacher at University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, which is an HBCU. So we spent 5 years there, and afterwards moved to the Washington, D.C. area where I finished high school and then went to Penn State undergrad, where my father had gone, and then continued my education and at Penn State as well, doing my MD, PhD there. And during my time there is when I met Tonya. it was during the latter part of my, because I was an MD, PhD, a lot of the class that I had started with, the interesting story is the class that I started with had finished their process. And I had gone off to Texas to finish part of my PhD, came back to Pennsylvania, and then we met during the latter part of my education.
It's so funny that everyone that knew Atu before I did, and then that came to know me, always said, you have to meet Atu, you have to meet Atu, you guys would be, everyone just kind of, who knew us individually, thought that we shared so many similar interests that we would connect. And they were, I mean, that the chemistry would be there, they were absolutely right. I guess some of our common interests would be things like fashion and traveling, and Atu's very spontaneous, I'm very spontaneous.
You're spontaneous?
I'm very spontaneous. And art. So that's kind of, you know, our backgrounds are similar in the sense that we've taken these paths to get to where we are. We found our way through science here, and now can finally delve into our passions and not be as, you know, medical school and residency is very structured and it's all about survival, but now we get to relax and really tap into the things that bring us joy. And art is one of those things.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful beginning to our conversation. And what comes to mind immediately with regard to the marriage of art and science is that perhaps as a part of your journey, you'll also have an opportunity to look at what conservation is in relation to your work from a scientific perspective. Because as you know, the molecular structure of paint is basically curly, and it has to be flattened out. That's why the idea of putting painting oils over fireplaces or in bathrooms or in kitchens where temperature fluctuations take place will make the oil eventually crack. And so, you know, and a lot of fine art students who were passionate about science, they ended up going into conservation. But because you do understand the sciences and on many levels, it could be a very interesting addition to your adventure together to explore. Because there's also a relationship between a lot of plastic surgeons who are artists and who are painters and go into the area of plastic surgery. So there's so many different interdisciplinary intersections with the visual arts. What was the catalyst for you to begin your collecting in 2015? And where were you when that all happened?
So just to put it in perspective, we were newly married, so you know we're obviously trying to find things that we were newly married and freshly out of training and relocating for our new jobs in New Orleans. So while there, my grandmother, who's, as I expressed, was a huge part of my upbringing, passed away a month shy of her 101st birthday. So all I am is grateful of all the time I had to spend with her. But she passed, and within a week of her passing, one day we had left church, and Tanya was like, "We have a stop, so before we get home," and I let her tell kind of like how that came about.
To put in perspective, Atu and I did our residencies in 2 different cities. We had lived apart for almost 4 years, which was very challenging. And so here we are, newly married, finally in the same place. We actually accepted jobs in New Orleans. I had never even been there. I just knew that I wanted to be in the same place with him. And so there we were in New Orleans, trying to meet new people, trying to kind of establish our new roots. We used to host these parties in our apartment called Empire TV show watch parties. You might be familiar with the TV show.
Empire had just started, and it was a really
popular at
the time.
And one evening after the show, they featured an artist on a local news channel. His name was John Moody, and they were actually referencing an image that he had created that was on the set of Empire. And they were basically talking about how he had had other works that had made it to the White House on display for some limited amount of time, and that he was really elevating himself as an emerging artist. And at the end of the show, they included his email address to reach out for commissions if you wanted to. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Atu's grandmother, I had met her finally earlier that year before she passed. I understood what she meant to the family. I just wanted to do something special for him. And I reached out to him, and a few emails later, we had come up with this portrait idea. And so we worked out all the things behind the scenes, and that one day we went to pick it up, and I'll never forget that moment. That was our first piece. And it was so special to us. And it really has just been a central focus of our collection. You know, we house it in our legacy room. That's what we call our former living room. And it's behind us, but I know we have a photo of it. But essentially, we have centered our space in this room around this portrait and have cultivated other images around it that represent, you know, generations of our family members on both sides.
Yeah.
So I really feel like this is a very special portrait for us, and I hope that it's with us for, you know, throughout our lives and through our children's lives, and something that we can pass on to them. John Moody has since really just, his trajectory has been amazing. He's essentially now like an actor. He's also an activist. A lot of his work is centered around social injustices, and so he's really done well as an artist. And so I'm proud to also have had the opportunity very early on to have gotten this piece done by him. So
yeah, and the other important part about what time the room and the legacy room we decided to put together, because you know, we're from different parts of the world, and quite far away from where we currently are, but you know, again, we wanted to make sure that our kids understood that they're connected. They have connections in throughout the world that they should, you know, appreciate and hold on to. That will help them. You know, it's important for their growth trajectory too.
So the catalyst essentially for starting. So that was our first piece, and then incidentally, we were invited to. We're invited to a mutual friend's house. We had no idea who the mutual friend was. And it was for an art event. And when we showed up, the mutual friend was CCH Pounder, and had the opportunity to just be a part of her space and seeing her collection. And, you know, the relationship definitely blossomed. And I would say she essentially became our unofficial art advisor.
Yes, but she's so much more than that to us.
Yeah, she is. She's an incredible human being, as well as a talented actress and artist, and, you know, art, you know, enthusiast, and, you know, and also
teacher,
quite a visionary and a teacher in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, and that is the nature of people who are engaged in any area of the literary, performing, or visual arts, because you tend to use the divergent thought process, that part of your brain that is looking at endless possibilities of how to say something, how to write something, how to perform something, how to paint, how it works, does it not work? And that divergent thought process is so important, just as the other part, you know, the linear thought process. And that's, you know, so I think that, quickly back to what you were saying about this legacy room for your children, you're exposing them to visual ideas that stimulate both sides of their brain. And at the same time, you know, someone like, you know, Cece, you know, is a wonderful, you know, person to meet to begin your journey also. So tell us a little bit about that gathering.
So, I mean, when I that was such a great time to have met her and Frank, and then continue to be exposed to other people who are just as passionate and artists, Yanae. So you know, we had opportunities to go to her house on several other occasions, and just being in the space, how she could pick a piece and say, what is that? There was a piece, I recall stories we had about a piece she had, which was about Susu, and it was about how, you know, in some, you know, in parts of Africa, how women had come together to empower themselves through organization, saving money, being able to then finance other people that were within the community to help them succeed. So just conversations around pieces in the house really were inspiring, you know.
Yeah, and all of a sudden,
excuse me one moment. I just, in case for some people who are listening who never have heard the term Susu before, I just wanted to try to clarify, because there's different variations of it. It's very, It's a matrilineal tradition among women throughout the Caribbean and the African diaspora. And also it's a way that a group of women would come together. They might, one version of it is everybody may contribute, let's say $100 every week. And then it rotates who gets the whole pot. And this was the way that many of the women would save money. And it was a way of investing without interest. And it was really about building community, a community among women, economic independence. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because we have some people that are listening that may not be familiar with what the concept of Susu is. It has many other different names as well. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah, so it went from, just considering art aesthetically, like this is something beautiful for our home, to being more conversational. Like this is something that actually stimulates a conversation, answers questions, asks questions, right? It's more than just creating a beautiful space. So initially it started as, oh, these are beautiful pieces of work. We want a home that feels, comfortable and a sanctuary for us to come home to being more like, oh, we want to be surrounded by images that stimulate us and force us to think about these stories that the artists are trying to tell us and connecting with those stories. And I think having been influenced by Cece's love for the art and her pushing us to think about these things has definitely helped change the thought process and the catalyst for our collection.
Well, that is a very important part of collecting, is the thought process. Because when we think about artists, they are making their visual statements for themselves and for strangers, people who look at it. But there's a communication, there's sort of that parallels jazz in terms of a call and response. And what your experience, the sum of your experiences and the sum of their experiences, and what you are able to derive not only aesthetically, but even in terms of some of the messaging, is very important. So in a lot of ways, fine art they are ideas, they're visual ideas. And this is particularly significant, when you think about a history in which the visual ideas of artists of African descent were considered less than, because of the whole historic arc of justifying enslaving people of African descent because they were considered subhuman or less than, and they were unintelligent, and they were only good for breeding and for childbearing and labor. And so the idea that these visual artists could have these sophisticated ideas with the plastic arts, even though when you look at traditional ceremonial African art, which is very, abstract and very sophisticated, and then the way that it is turned the contemporary African artists, and the way that they're combining everything, this was considered incomprehensible. And so thinking about art as collectors and thinking about making art as artists, and then having this intersection is a very, very important exchange that takes place. It's not just pretty pictures or difficult pictures, or it's, there's a thought process. And so I'd like you just to briefly talk a little bit more about how you think about collecting. You started to say about stories, the relationships with people that you have, and perhaps if we can just begin to look at your collection and the pieces that you have selected, you could share with us why this piece moved you, what it is about the work of that artist, as well as some of the stories that have made it meaningful. Because as you know, there's different types of collectors, and some of them really love the activity of interacting with the artist and the social activity of people and art professionals, and others just do it for decoration or or prestige. But for you, there's a clear passion and an agenda for your children to lead by example, to make sure that they are confident and self-assured, and that they come from something. And all of these things are important variables in a family of collectors. So there you are again.
Yeah. So as we said, this is the piece that kind of started it all. This is just shows a woman that whose influence resonates with so many people that I couldn't even name in this conversation. She impacted a lot of people, and just by being herself, and she was unwavering about who she was, and she was strong and very, very strong in that way, and that's why I appreciate her, and she's such a cornerstone in my life, and I want my kids to know that.
And it's interesting because our kids already feel very connected to this piece. Actually, our almost 4-year-old, I say almost 4-year-old, at 2, he's also a little at 2, often says, "Tell me about grandma. Tell me about grandma in Ghana." And so he already realizes his connection to this portrait and this individual. So that's really, really a powerful part of it too for us.
And his connection to a place, as you said, you know.
He's never been to Ghana yet. He talks about Ghana frequently because of all of the art that he sees around and the origins of them sometimes being from Ghana. So that's really something that's really awesome at his young age.
So as collectors, you know, in addition to the sentimental and deeply, deeply personal connection to this painting, when you look at this work and you're looking at this particular artist, John Moody, and you're looking at the way that he applies the paint to the canvas, his use of color, his composition, I mean, how are all of those things impacting the way you feel about the painting beyond the sentimental feeling as a collector?
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the bright colors that splash throughout the brownness of her background, and I think to me that is it just gives her life even beyond her passing. You know, it gives her life, and the smile on her face. He captured that picture so well. I was blown away.
And this was a black and white photo,
right? That's true. That's true.
Apply color to. He didn't know what her complexion was, right? He doesn't know what aura she gives off and when you're alive with her in that space. And yet he was able to capture that with acrylic on canvas and a splash painting. And I would venture to say this did not take, I mean, he started working on this the morning that I picked it up. So
and that's what he had said.
It was still wet when we got there.
He's like, you probably want to keep it out to dry a little bit.
It was just like she spoke with and used him in some way to create this for us. And he just knocked it out of the park.
This is wonderful. Can we see the next slide? Okay, tell us a little bit about this particular artist and
So this is Lindele Nsweli, who's a young South African artist. I really enjoy looking at his work, and I found him through Instagram, social media. Started following him, and then saw these 2 pieces, Unhambo 1 and Unhambo 2, which means the journey. The journey of the 1, the journey of the 2 is kind of how I interpreted it. And and started a conversation with him. The way he expressed the idea behind these 2 pieces is the journey of people. You never see their struggles, and people see only perhaps the victories, but you never see the struggles. And it really resonated with me because I was like, and it resonated with me in the imagery and also in the 2 pieces that were presented, because I felt it told a little bit about my story and Tanya's story at the same time. The figures kind of, in its simplicity, kind of reflects a little bit of that. Tanya, my uncle calls her eleganza, and I think I appreciate that too. So I felt
I agree.
The female image was quite representative of her, just kind of pure elegance and its simplicity. Having come through from Anguilla, going to Peterborough, from the island to probably one of the coldest places on that you could live. The juxtaposition of that, having powered through her undergraduate educations, powered through the life in Anguilla, had wonderful parents bringing her up, but Tanya's father did not go to college. He taught himself how to read as an adult, but
That's extraordinary. That's just
has a daughter who aspired to be a doctor. Okay, went off to Peterborough, Canada, went through what she had to do, came to Pennsylvania, and now is an OB-GYN in the United States of America, and a fabulous one at that. And to me, it's just like my story of this kid that just in Ghana, I played soccer from morning till nighttime, came to America, and it had to adapt to a new country, for whatever it's worth, had fun doing so. Lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, as I said, lived in Gaithersburg, Maryland, went off to Penn State, made some great friends, medical school, and I'm a radiation oncologist. So it just kind of tells a little bit about our journeys individually, but how we complement each other.
It's hard to forget where you've come from when you are connected so much to a piece like this that reminds you about that journey, right? So for me, that was, really what connected with me with these pieces. We actually house these in the legacy room, and they're next to each other, separated by a mirror. And the mirror is the place where you'd see your reflection, and then you're flanked by these beautiful pieces that takes you on that journey. So, so that's essentially the story behind these.
Where you've been, where you are, and where you're going. It's a continuum. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right, thank you for sharing that. Can we see the next image, please? Please tell us about Brian Dovey Golden.
Brian Dovey Golden. He's also a young artist from Chicago. Man, Chicago has a lot of great artists, is what I'm coming to find out. But he created this piece, "The Halos Let Me Know That You're Here." And this image, it's an acrylic on paper, and that is housed in our foyer. In the dark, you only see the halos, and then in the light, you see the halos and these figures. And again, it tells a story about our ancestry, those that have come before us, so many that have come before us, okay? And how they are all with us in a very spiritual way, even when you don't see them, and beyond. So to me, that's what drew me to this image. And it applies to everybody. Everybody has a history, everybody comes from something. And from there we can grow. So that's where that's what drew me to this image.
I think we purchased this in maybe 2018 or so. And I would say that this was probably the piece that for the first time I really felt like I got the whole art collection thing. So I may have still been very much in the space of, these are beautiful things, they tell me a story, I kind of like it, but really this piece pushed me to really understand the importance of being surrounded by images like this and what this will mean for generations to come, how this will be a part of our estate that we can pass on, how this really pushes us to think about art, not just on a very superficial, figurative level, but the deeper meaning to all of this. And so I too will probably tell you stories about how I was a little bit resistant to some of the pieces that he would, offer for us to purchase. We'd have a lot of back and forth, and I didn't really connect with them until this piece happened. Would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really know.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Listening to both of you and looking at this piece, it's really wonderful when there is a piece of art that makes you reflect upon both tangible, visible, and ephemeral, invisible manifestations of reality at the same time. And I'm fascinated by the fact that the artist was able to paint this black on black, and then with these halos, and that when when you don't have light articulating the surface of the painting, that what is most prominent are the halos, which for me, looking at it, just reinforces the seen and the unseen realities that are going on right now around us all the time. And a lot of people may not think in those terms, but I certainly do, and there are others who do as well. So I find this to be a particularly profound piece and conceptually, and also whatever a person's spiritual tradition or connection is, the concept of something with us always, some entity or God, whatever, around us, and in this case, halos, you think of angels, and,
Yeah.
and then also, it allows you to ponder, the manifestations or the attributes of the one who created the halos. And what are those attributes, and how do we draw upon those unseen attributes of generosity and kindness and compassion and mercy and being loving and all of these other things. So it's really quite quite profound, and I actually really like the piece as well. So
Yeah. Thank you.
I look forward
I think
to
this
seeing in
piece.
person, because there's nothing like seeing work live.
Yes. This has always been sort of a fan favorite, I would say.
Yeah.
I hosted an event at my house for my work a couple of years ago, and this was, a piece that we had grown accustomed to having and hadn't really considered, that it is a little bit of a shock. And now it's quite big. I would say it's about 7 feet big, 7 feet tall, so it's quite large. But certainly, everyone seems to be quite drawn to this. It's an amazing piece.
And just
Go ahead.
oh yeah, just one more thing about this. I think it's humbling as we live our lives to know that someday you will end up in this vein. You'll be so that's humbling, and it kind of helps also. That's a reminder to myself as well. Yeah.
It's an important reminder, because the sum of our experiences that enable us to do the things that we do professionally also are parallel to some of our experiences that impact our souls and our spirits, so that it inspires us to be our best selves, and to work on the things that we need to work on, and so that the legacy can be not only our good deeds. It sort of quickly, it reminds me of this story about three friends, and you tell your friends you need their help, and the first friend says, I can't go with you, I'm homebound. And the second friend says, well, I can go with you up to the city limits. And the third friend says, I can go with you the whole journey. But the first friend is a metaphor for our material possessions. They can't travel with us wherever we go. And the second friend is your family. They can help you so far, but you've got to go the rest of the way yourself. Yeah. And then the third friend are all of your good deeds, all of your good intentions, and that travels with us wherever we go.
Yeah, awesome.
So let's look at the next piece, please. Okay, tell us about O'Neill Scott's piece.
So this is O'Neill Scott. He is a Philadelphia-based artist. This piece is called We Are the Roses, and it's actually oil on board. And it features a portrait of a young guy. It's actually his nephew, DJ, in the center, wearing the t-shirt with the Martin Luther King on. But in the backdrop are Polaroid pictures of a number of different individuals, spanning multiple, generations. Some people that we have been fortunate to live with during our present time, Barack Obama, for example, Oprah Winfrey, and some of them that have come long before us and that we've come to know. This was an important piece for me. This was a more recent acquisition, I think last year, but it was actually painted, I think, in 2019. And this was important for several reasons. So for one, I was not born in this country. I was not raised in the country. I actually came to the US when I was well into my 20s. And so I did not learn American history in high school or in middle school. A lot of these figures I've had to learn about on my own as I've made my way through the US system. I grew up in a country where I was the majority, right? So most people look like me. I hadn't had to think about my race at all, really, until I came to America and had to start to think about, when you're questioned how you identify and having to select and really pushing you to think about your lineage. And here I am in the US, really just benefiting from the paths that have been made for me, or the shoulders that I'm standing on for these giants that are captured here, and really benefiting from their success, and some of their triumphs and tribulations. So this was an important piece for me to connect to some of the American greats that have allowed for me to be as successful as I am, but also a reminder that these are individuals that I can continue to learn about. I think what's most riveting about this piece is actually the blank Polaroid. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a blank space there.
Yes, I see.
And I loved that the artist even thought to include that, because what does that mean, right? What does that mean for you, for the person that's looking and taking this piece? And for me, it's like, I think about all the individuals that would take that place in my personal story, right? So someone that comes to mind is a family friend and physician that I shadowed all throughout my high school life on Anguilla. Now, there are not that many physicians on Anguilla, and certainly not many that are from natives of Anguilla. A lot of them are brought in from other countries. And so that was someone that took me under his wing, Dr. Lowell Hughes. I will forever be indebted to him for what he allowed me to do at such a young age. And I probably wouldn't be who I am without him. And so that would be someone that I place there. I also think about who will be there in the future. Could it be my sons? Are they going to have sons?
Could it be you?
Could it be me?
Yeah.
Could I do something that significantly contributes significantly to something that allows me that opportunity? So it really just pushes you to think about that. This is just so magnificent. I love O'Neil Scott's work so very much. I love that we had the opportunity to acquire this. This will forever be something that I hold near and dear to me, and I hope that we can just keep passing on, be a part of this estate and the legacy that we're building for our children.
Yeah, like when you look at this piece, it on the background, first and foremost, it has this young guy just who could be like my son, just sitting there leaning against these greats, a wall with all of these greats on it. And you can see Shirley Chisholm, Marcus Garvey, Sidney Poitier, in the same image as LeBron James and former President Barack Obama in the same image, and then again, the empty space. It's like, do you put yourself, it challenges you to say, to put yourself there if you dare, and I often say that for people like me, we grew up in a time where there was a President Barack Obama. That was me in parts of medical school and me in my residency. Very, very challenging times. And to have a figure, a person of that stature who looked, like me in that office, it pushed a generation forward that will, I guess, in someday there'll be books about it. There'll be more stories to tell about it. But I don't take that for granted per se. So the stories go on. I think this is a great, great piece in that, again, it challenges our kids. Are they going to put themselves in this position? There was one person that, in preparing for this, I thought about, who told me a story that I would never forget. And this is a lady that, Ms. Davis, when we initially moved to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, there was a lady called Ms. Davis, Joyce Davis, who became a fast friend to my mother. She decided she was going to help my mother get acclimated to U.S., to America. And we all, as kids, we all benefited from it. But so she would come to, she was an angel to our family, I would say. But more recently, she told me about a story. And this is a lady, I think, I've never asked her age, but she's, I believe late 60s, early 70s. And she told me a story about when she finished high school and wanted to go to college, and her family lived on a farm that was owned by a white family. And when she went to go tell the family that she wanted to go on to college. And the response was that, okay, that's fine. But if you want to go on to college, your entire family have to vacate this property on our land. And when she told her grandfather that that was the case, her grandfather said, okay, if you wish to go to college, we will all vacate this land to give you the opportunity to go to college. So a whole family had to make a change in their life in somebody who still lives today. Like when you think about these type of stories, you think it's that centuries ago, but she went on to college, became a teacher, and made a beautiful life for herself. But these stories are, these stories are being told by people who are still present. And to me, her story is it's one of those that has opened paths and opened doors for people like me, again, to be able to come to America and exist. So I wanted to share that. That was a very important thing.
So she would be your Polaroid picture.
She would be my Polaroid picture. She would be a Polaroid.
That's a very important story. And, when you look at that piece again, can you put it back up for a second? Because, when I was listening to both of you talk about this particular piece and just looking at it, it's you have a young person there that could very well be your son, your children, and with Martin Luther King on his chest, and then you have all these other people, who have made great sacrifices for the welfare of all of their people, their communities, and their people, and also have contributed to humanity tremendously. And but it's leadership through example. And it makes me think about Tonya, your father. I mean, the fact that he taught himself how to read as an adult, and for you to bear witness to that kind of determination, making a goal, pushing through, attaining it, that kind of bearing witness, has an impact, a great impact. It had an impact among other things,
Absolutely.
of course. And also, something that many Americans of African descent do not have a reference for is what it's like to live in a place where you are visually the majority. And, I was born and raised here, but I spent 3 years of my adolescence living in the Virgin Islands, where I was now among the majority. And there was a tremendous amount of freedom in sense of value, self-worth. There wasn't anything you couldn't accomplish. It just never occurred to you that you couldn't accomplish, because nobody ever said, no, you can't accomplish it. Just work hard, do it, be who you are. And I think that, that's a very important thing for people to understand, that psyche. And how this particular piece, for the reasons that you can have a chance to put your own mentor, heroine, or hero in that space, or that you can envision yourself in that space, but in a space where you're making a difference, where you're contributing to the society, community, and the world. And I think that part that many communities that are throughout the African diaspora, there's always that kind of encouragement, that I've seen outside of the United States, to make a contribution to your community. Whatever you do, be the best that you can, because you can be. So there's a lot of layers, of course, in terms of how to look at this. And what a great gift for your children to have this in their home as well. Let's look at the next piece, please. So here you have a Lois Mailou Jones.
Yeah, so this was another awesome acquisition. This is from 1971, acrylic on canvas, and this is Philomene Robert. So what we do know about this piece is that based on the year, we think that it was actually created during her time in Haiti. But when we look at this, obviously, I mean, we have two Black sons. I mean, it couldn't have been any closer to us in the literal sense, right? And we want to surround our kids with images of children and individuals that look like them, right? Representation matters. We live in a geographic space right now where there really are not any Black families in our neighborhood. Certainly my kid may be the only Black kid in his class at this point. And so they need to be, we call these images, we affectionately call them images of affirmation in our house, where they are surrounded by such positive images of Black children that it changes the narrative. It breaks the stereotypes. It gives them the knowledge that they are strong. They are coming from a very culture of excellence within our house. And so we do have a few portraits of small children, small Black children, for that reason. And this was just
just kind of again to see kids. These are two kids that were in Haiti. Just to give them the idea that there are other kids in other parts of the world that look like them, be inspired by them, live a life that will inspire them, vice versa. So, and then the bright colors kind of speak to me about the bright future.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. This is good. Let's look at the next piece, please. I'm looking at the time and I'm saying, wait, we're having a great time, and I have a couple of things I want to ask you, but I'd like to open it up for Q&A as well. So tell us a little bit about this piece, please.
This one, this is about Ghana. This is about the piece of the heritage. It shows the gold around the head. This is from Solomon Adufa, who's a Ghanaian artist who grew up partly in Chicago. Okay. And in my conversation with him, when I found him, we had an opportunity to chat a little bit. We realized that we kind of grew up in a similar area, Dansoma and Accra, at some point in time, and may have even. I went to school across a set of apartments that he lived at. So it's crazy how now Solomon Adufa is a renowned artist, I would say. Presents this young lady in a garment that is very traditional. It's a traditional Ghanaian festive garment, and with gold around her head, beads around the neck, and the kente around her bust. And it's on the background of Ankara cloth that is very popular in Ghana as well. So yeah, this speaks volumes about my background in Ghana.
Again, and affirmation.
And also, the gold is a very significant thing for Ghana, because in Africa, Ghana is the largest gold producer. I mean, we have more than 23 or 4 large mines for gold and diamonds and other things. But and I think that's a very important thing, because when you do research about the history of gold in the course of colonization, in the course of history before colonization, it's very fascinating, and particularly in Ghana. So this is really quite powerful. What's the next piece? It's like, what's next?
I know, we actually had we got these
great artists here. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
This is the legendary Atu Wright.
This is our most recent acquisition.
So, he dabbles a little bit in the artworks, creating figures that he sees in his books.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing this with him. We play around together, drawing, before our nightly regimen. So, just as again, another opportunity to open his mind to all the possibilities of what he could be in life. This is something I can help him with, so I do. Yeah.
But we really enjoy. We have. I mean, there are so many works, and again, everything has a story. Everything has been truly just a journey collecting together. It actually has done a lot for our relationship. It has, stimulated conversations that brought up topics that we had never even thought of, really just talking about similarities in our upbringing, So it's been amazing collecting. We share our art through an Instagram page. We were A lot of our friends and family have always asked to see some of our acquisitions. So we started an Instagram page so people can just kind of follow along. And that has been an amazing opportunity as well. So I know our time is like running short, but
Well,
Yeah.
we're okay. We have a little bit of time. I wanted to quickly ask you, what kind of advice would you give new collectors?
yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, if you're passionate about art, and you probably are because you're here right now,
Right.
that it's definitely worth it, and for different reasons. So, for one, it gives you personal pleasure. It has been so wonderful to just be able to be surrounded by beautiful pieces of art that create a wonderful living space. These are things that will be part of your estate and your legacy that you can pass on to your future generations. It's not just about the investment and the fact that most arts do tend to appreciate. It's living in the now and taking in what value it creates for you now, that environment of positivity and creativity, Black excellence. And so it's certainly worth it. Create a budget. So a lot of people find that collecting art could be cost prohibitive. I had to get over that hurdle myself over the years, and thinking about it, it's not like buying a pair of shoes or a purse, right? Those seem to be easier decisions than sometimes buying a piece of art. But but these, the value that art holds compared to a pair of shoes, for example, you create a budget and you make it work. We have actually used social media quite a bit in some of our acquisitions as well. So just finding artists that you connect with on social media, following them, following them and connecting with their work, asking about their process, doing studio visits, going to art fairs, going to galleries.
Reading, it's very important to read.
Yeah.
It's important to become familiar with different styles of art in the course of art history. I often encourage people to not start from the beginning of the book, but to just start where they're interested, because you don't have to be linear in this experience and journey is not linear. It's
Right.
wherever you are. So if you find a chapter or a series of images in a book, start there. You will read the whole book eventually, but just keep going to museums and galleries, or go online, obviously, speak to people, but learning about the materials artists are using, reading critical reviews, art history books, because a lot of the references that artists are making in their work, some artists are speaking to each other. Some artists are showing you who they've been influenced by. It helps you in developing not only your eye as well as the visceral experience. So I just wanted to remind people of that.
And I would say you don't have to necessarily aspire to be a collector to buy a piece of art, right? And so we had never even really considered ourselves collectors until people kind of gave us that designation more recently. And we're like, oh, I guess we do collect art. But for us, it was just a very individual. We like this piece, we connected with it, we buy it. But now it's becoming something even bigger than that.
This is true. You do not have, I'm sorry, I'm just fixing something here. It's true. I mean, most people start, collecting, for home decor or office decor. You're trying to create an environment that's warm and engaging and comfortable, and so people start there, and that's true. You're not going in, I'm a collector. It's we all eat food. It doesn't mean that we're a gourmand. So, so I agree with you. It's an opportunity for self-discovery, and the more informed you are about what you're looking at, and or just how you feel, but establishing a budget is important. Working within that, I think the most important thing that I would encourage new collectors is that not only what we've discussed, but whatever you decide to acquire, make sure that it is the best in what you can afford. Don't buy what you can afford. Buy the best of what you can afford. There's a huge distinction between that. Because if you just buy and you're thinking about just buying what you can afford, it's not necessarily going to be the best piece by that artist that you like. But if you buy the best within your budget, that piece time and time again will be not only a jewel in your collection, but it will appreciate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind. We're going to go over a little bit, which we have permission to do, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what do you think seasoned collectors should pay attention to?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, so I would say this. It's there could be a tendency to gravitate to pieces that are to artists that are on trend or that are having an upward trajectory or that's that's in the media or something like that, and you almost feel compelled that you must own this particular artist because of the trajectory that they're on. There's a lot of outside influence. I mean, we're part of like Atu's part of like chat groups and stuff where they discuss artists, and like you're almost just kind of like, I must have this in order for me to have a collection of a certain caliber, right? So you find yourself going down this road where you're almost collecting or acquiring pieces that you really don't have any connection to whatsoever. You have no real interest in, but it's what everyone else is getting.
Yeah,
And
just being cognizant of the trends and but making sure things still resonate to you.
Be authentic and stay true to who you are and the things. It is a little bit of a slippery slope to like invest in pieces just because it's trending and you know what I mean? So that would be what I would say.
That's true. I mean, there are different types of collectors. There are collectors who collect fine art like they're collecting blue chip stocks, and they buy the work and they put them in warehouses and they appreciate and then they sell. So, you know, there will always be those kinds of collectors, and it's true. You know, there are a lot of artists that are trending, and some of them are trending and they may or may not sustain the trend, and others will. I have expressed this concern by going to various art fairs and seeing artists, the work is still wet, and they're, you know, working like machines and everything, but what's happening is that their quality is suffering. So I'm seeing certain artists who have big names and are at auction and doing very well, but there's, from an appraiser's perspective, when I put my appraiser hat on, I'm really kind of concerned because I'm seeing that the quality is uneven because of the intense pressure on them to produce work like they're in a factory.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, goes to my point of always buying the best piece that you can afford. It really takes time, whether you're a new collector or a seasoned collector, to look at the quality of the work, how the artist is working with the materials. Look at many pieces by the artist so that you can really see that kind of continuity, and understand, you know, what you're looking at. And that's why it's really wonderful to be able to speak to other collectors and also to speak to a range of art professionals about the work. Now, you know, I'm also curious from your perspective. I have my own perspective, but I'm curious from your perspective. What have you identified as differences in the marketplace since 2015 compared to how these differences compared to now, and how have these differences influenced your collecting or not?
Well, so one thing that I think is I see now compared to the prices to get in, if you want to get original art by let's say emergent artists, the price point, the entry point is probably a little bit higher a lot higher compared to where it was in 2015. I would say that is probably one thing that I have noticed, and you know, perhaps it's a reflection of the stock market and how it's been going up pretty rapidly. But yeah, people see art as an investment, and perhaps that's also fueling and influencing how the price points for a lot of emergent, perhaps what would consider emergent artists, the price point that they're selling their work for now compared to perhaps 5 years ago.
Yeah, I guess it's impossible to determine artwork's true value.
Right.
But in our own kind of like anecdotal evaluation, it does seem that things are pricier for the same quality of work.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there's a number of things that have impacted the shift in the price. Of course, the increased interest in collecting works by artists of African descent, specific to the United States, but also globally. And there's been a number of reasons for wanting to fill the historic and aesthetic gaps in American art collections with the contemporaries of many of the established, predominantly white male artists that were upheld throughout the 20th century. I think the other variable has to do with the fact that unlike previous generations of American artists of African descent in this country, where the way that the artists would talk about their influences in their work, they would pay homage to those who were before them and talk about it. A lot of the contemporary artists are not talking about really who their influences are. It's like they've come up with the idea themselves, but you see who they're influenced by when you look at the artwork, which is the other reason why it's important for collectors to really become aware of art history from all over the world, because then it allows you to connect in a lot of other ways, intellectually, visually, conceptually, spiritually, maybe. But the pricing with a lot of contemporary new artists, young artists, is a lot of times not. It's unrealistically. It's not based on developing a price point. It's based on, when I speak to a lot of these younger artists who are in grad school, just coming out of grad school, they look at, oh, this well-known artist who's the same age as them is getting this amount of money, so then we're peers, we're contemporaries, so I should charge the same amount of money. And they're not understanding how the collective activity of the art world functions to propel an artist into the market.
Yeah, we talked about that.
So I think that that's something that's important also for collectors who always want to get, the best piece for the least amount of money, because that's just the business. But I think that there's an opportunity to be respectful to all artists at different stages of their career, but particularly with emerging artists in the marketplace, to be able to talk to them, a little bit about how much you value their work, but also how you're coming to an understanding without devaluing them, because I know that a lot of them don't understand why a collector would say that's too much, and they go off tough, and that's just an artist, living in their head, not really looking at how the marketplace is structured. But we could go on, and I want to conclude with just asking you to, what's the last thing you would like people to know from you, Otto and Tonya, about your collecting and what you want them to know that you think would be beneficial to them?
I think what they want, I want people to know that our objective is to create a space that is filled with figures that inspires all, and like, I just want to pay a little homage to Fahama Paku as far as like the work that he creates. And just like that, I want people to see themselves in these images that are in my home. Dr. Fahama Paku, his images, I a lot of them I see myself in, because he's a little bit older than me, but I see when he talked about before about art, my fresh, I appreciate his fresh. It comes forth in the way that he presents these images, and I see myself in that. And the most important thing is that what he's doing is normalizing it. He's normalizing it, and that's important.
Yeah, and for me, I think just the same, not to overthink it. Trust your gut, go on how you feel, the feelings that it evokes, if it feels right. Take the plunge. Don't discredit what value it will add to your life, not a monetary or financial gain, but more than just that. And I think that they would really appreciate it. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken with our collection, and I think that has certainly helped us curate all these wonderful pieces. Just kind of using that as our baseline principle.
Well, thank you so much. And I concur. I think that Dr. Fahama Paku's vision for the African Diaspora Art Museum, as well as his vision and the very powerful and profound statements that he makes in his work about being a Black man in the world, about beauty and strength, and also a very powerful statement about, navigating space, in your own terms, which is very, very powerful with his imagery, as well as affirming the value of self-assurance and confidence. And it's very intelligent work, and it's beautiful visually. So that's wonderful. And I do want to say that he follows the tradition of visual artists who also are scholars, and also are curators, and also, this is a tradition that goes back to James Porter and Dr. Driscoll and Samela Lewis, and Dr. Richard Powell. I mean, there's a tradition of artists who are scholars, who are using an interdisciplinary approach to conveying important ideas about culture, and in particularly African diasporic culture. So thank you again for inviting us to contribute to this vision, and it's really been a pleasure to be here with you. I have a brief announcement, and that is to please, those of you who are here with us this afternoon, please be sure to visit ADAMA.org. It's ADAMATL.org/store. And it will be, that address is in the chat. So to purchase exclusive swag. Some exclusive swag, including our redefinition long sleeve tee. And if you have enjoyed today's program, please consider supporting ADAMA's mission with a tax-deductible gift. You can make a donation online now at ADAMATL.org/donate. That's ADAMATL.org/donate. And I want to just wish everyone an extraordinary rest of this day. And may you all have good health and many meaningful experiences to share with your family and